Obakabi, baby. Aloha and welcome back. This is Liberalism versus Socialism from Lion Struggle Collective. I want to do this video because I get a lot of views on my DEMINEM videos. Kyle Kalinske, right? And people say that we're on the same side, that I'm arguing for the same things he wants. But he's a vote blue no matter who guy, and he's a liberal, so he's on the right. If you were a vote blue no matter who, you are right of center, and I can't vote for a Democrat. I mean, there's maybe a couple I could vote for here and there, but for the most part, I am not a liberal, or for any part, I'm not a liberal. I am more a socialist, maybe a communist. I am of the left. So I am very different than the real dim shady Kyle Kalinske. This video does a pretty good job at describing liberalism versus socialism, so I'm going to add my 2 cents as we go.
Within the realm of mainstream politics across the West, and particularly the US, many people are of the idea that only two ideologies exist: liberalism and conservatism. This then leaves people to say, if you are not conservative, you must be...
So this very much skews our Overton window. We don't talk about what real leftism is in the United States.
liberal, and vice versa. If you attack Trump, you must love Obama, and vice versa. If you're not a Republican, you must be a Democrat, and vice versa. I think you can see where this is going. This leads to the idea that anyone who can be pegged as on the left must be a liberal in some form or another, including people who self-identify as or are labeled as socialists. Socialists actually have a lot of critiques of liberals and of liberalism. Many conservatives tend to put leftists and liberals in the same box, even though there are vast disagreements between them. Liberals want to reform capitalism. Leftists want it abolished. Liberals often support imperialism. Leftists oppose it. Liberal identity politics ignores class struggle. Leftist identity politics acknowledges it and is intersectional. Despite these clear differences between today's liberals and the anti-capitalist left, many on the right wing either cannot or will not make that distinction. But of course, if something is close to you, you can notice its details and complexities. If it is far away from you, you can only notice its generalities. Because liberals have always insisted that they are on the left, with some even going so far as to label themselves the true left against socialists and communists, and because liberals are widely represented in Western societies, those on the right wing are able to easily generalize and say that anyone to the left of them must be some form of liberal. Centuries of this has diluted the meaning of countless terms, to the point where, in 2009, one could hear news anchors on national television refer to Barack Obama as a liberal communist fascist without a
liberal communist fascist, so like a lightly fascist, anti-fascist, fascist. That makes absolutely no sense. A liberal communist fascist. The right just breaks words, and the Democrats are on the right also. They just sit there and break words and make it impossible for us to communicate.
A single hint of irony or self-awareness.
Right.
Socialist, liberal, communist, fascist, without a single hint of irony or self-awareness. Socialists, who don't want to be confused with the average blue no matter who Democrat, have a difficult task ahead of them in distinguishing themselves from that group. It doesn't help that liberals occupy many powerful positions in business, politics, the media, and entertainment.
And then they call themselves the left too. That doesn't help either. They're out there in the spotlight and they act like they're on the left or the progressive.
By spreading awareness on what liberalism is and isn't, the political discourse in the US can be reoriented. True, there is a better understanding of what liberalism is in countries like the UK, France, and Australia than in the United States, but myths about the left still persist on a wide scale.
Definition of liberalism.
It would be wise to elaborate on what exactly liberalism is and what it isn't, giving a very brief overview. Liberalism can basically be defined as an ideology that emerged in Western Europe during the 17th and 18th century, or the so-called Age of Enlightenment. Though elements of liberalism could be found in various societies which existed previously in many parts of the world. The development of liberalism coincided with the development of the capitalist mode of production, emerging out of feudalism, with the growth of a bourgeois class based in the cities of Europe rivaling the established nobility of various royal families who typically wielded the majority of political power. With the development of capitalism came the development of capitalist property relations, and the obsession with property as the most coveted of all human rights remains a staple of liberalism to this day.
Man, I find that crazy how like people will just go back to property. Such a crazy thing that like just ownership of property is the biggest thing to people. Like your health or your kids or food or shelter, is it more important than just property?
Two complaints that the liberals of this time had about the feudal political system was the lack of representation for the newly emerging socio-political classes, and that the newly emerging capitalist and petty bourgeois classes were able to accumulate wealth without also accumulating political power.
That's absolutely not true. As you accumulate wealth, you accumulate political power in most any system.
The idea of a representative government instead of a hereditary monarchy was pushed heavily by liberals of this time and was considered quite radical, though ideas of who exactly deserved to be represented would end up splitting the liberal camp.
Right, who? Only certain people, land-owning white men in America. So, I mean, that's kind of fashy, right?
With the assertion of private property rights came the demand for an unregulated or free market. This principle is so enshrined
And again, free to who?
in liberal ideology that the idea of not having a free market system is considered unthinkable by many Western governments and would quickly result in a candidate pushing mild reforms being labeled as an extremist. These ideas culminated in four important revolutions in the 17th and 18th centuries, namely the so-called Glorious Revolution, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the Haitian Revolution.
Yeah.
To go into the history of each of these revolutions and their effects on liberal thought would be too daunting for the scope of this video. So instead we will focus on the development of conservatism as a form of liberalism, drawing lessons from history where necessary. Conservatism, in a broad sense, generally refers to the socio-political philosophy that focuses on the promoting of traditional and social and cultural institutions in a given culture. Because of this, what exactly a conservative believes is going to vary depending on the culture they come from. For example, a German conservative will not likely believe the same things that a Japanese conservative will. However, because liberalism was so integral to the shaping of their ruling ideologies of Western Europe and the United States, we will focus on the conservative developments of liberalism in this video. Many British liberals were supportive of the American Revolution and respected the emphasis placed by the colonists on private property rights and individual freedoms, though
But see, whose private property rights and whose individual freedom? They didn't care about the natives that were already here when they came in being illegal immigrants or whatever you want to call it, and just taken from the people that were here.
this admiration was far from universal. Conservatives who supported the crown were quick to point out the particularly brutal form of racial chattel slavery in the American colonies, despite the fact that these institutions had been built up by the British and made them powerful. There was even a debate among the American revolutionaries themselves over slavery, but since most of the members of the new government had become wealthy through the use of slaves or the trading of slaves, the institution was kept. The defining moment for the development of the liberal variety of conservatism, however, came with the French and Haitian revolutions. The widespread intensity and violence of the French Revolution shocked the sensibilities of many liberals in the United Kingdom, chief among them Edmund Burke. Well established amongst English and American liberals, Burke defended many institutions, such as the existence of the monarchy, the aristocracy, and hereditary succession, which the
So see, like, a conservative and these liberals, they want to kind of keep everything the same. That's why I call DEMINEM the real Dim Shady, because he knows this stuff, and he wants to keep the monarchy. He wants to keep the oligarchy. He wants to keep the duopoly. And he says all these left-wing things, gets a left-wing crowd, and then pushes them into the oligarchy. And to me, that's very not cool. I think that's evil. Like Malcolm X said, liberals are the foxes. They're worse than the wolves. DEMINEM is one of those that is one of the worst foxes out there.
more radical French liberals vigorously opposed. Above all, Burke held up the importance of honoring tradition, which, as we have seen, has been a core tenet of conservatism. Though Burke did not invent conservatism, he is widely credited with developing its liberal form. The Haitian Revolution was opposed for similar reasons. The liberal obsession with the property included slaves. The uprising against the French rulers of the island, which was known as San Domingo at the time, was decried by liberals of the day as a horrendous assault on the sacred right of property. Even Thomas Jefferson during his presidency offered the assistance of the U.S. military to the French to put down the rebellion.
Of course
It was the first instance of a very long and bloody history of U.S. involvement in Haiti. Of course,
U.S., but not necessarily Western involvement. It's all connected.
Not all liberals at this time were conservatives. Factions and interpretations of liberalism developed and changed over the centuries, but this divide still takes place within the framework of liberalism. Be it in the UK, the US, or elsewhere, those called liberals and conservatives today are not exactly polar opposites. They may disagree on how to handle specific issues, but at the end of the day, there are certain precepts and ideas regarding how society should operate and be run that are considered unquestionable by both.
All right. So this is going to be where me and DEMINEM differ greatly. He's going to sycophant the Democrats, which would just help the Republicans in the long run, where I'm going outside of that. Anybody who really wants to help change the system needs to go outside the duopoly. And he knows that, and so that's why he's shady.
So, how does Marxism respond to this false dichotomy between those called liberals and conservatives? For starters, Marxism posits that the world operates on a materialist basis, meaning that the history and development of society stems from the material conditions within those societies. This means that the ideas and ideology in a given society will be influenced by those conditions as well. Most importantly, Marxism asserts the predominance of the mode of production, which refers to the productive forces of society and the relations of production which governs its activity in driving societal development. Liberalism, however, is built on an idealist philosophy, accepting the hypothesis that ideas are the driving force in society, neglecting material conditions which may shape these ideas. Liberalism insists also on driving a wedge between the individual and the collective, and that the government's duty is to guarantee political liberties while mostly staying out of economics. One of the biggest criticisms by Marxists of liberalism is that it decries alienation in the realm of politics while dismissing it in the realm of economics. Marxism also rejects the
Right, that's why I say you can't be a social liberal and an economic, what do you call it, conservative, however they say that, like, oh, I'm socially progressive or socially, left or progressive, but I'm financially a conservative or financially to the right because I want to save money, because it takes the money to supply the society.
Every man for himself narrative that embeds itself into the collective psyches of capitalist market societies. Marx said it himself thusly in Contribution to the Critique of Political Economy. The further back we trace the course of history, the more does the individual, and accordingly also the producing individual, appear to be dependent and to belong to a larger whole. At first, the individual is, in a still quite natural manner, part of the family and of the tribe, which evolves from the family. Later, he is part of a community, of one of the different forms of community which arise from the conflict and merging of tribes. It is not until the 18th century that in bourgeois society the various forms of the social texture confront the individual as merely means toward his private ends, as external necessity. But the epoch which produces this standpoint, namely that of the solitary individual, is precisely the epoch of the as yet most highly developed social, according to this standpoint, general relations. Man is a political animal in the most literal sense. He is not only a social animal, but an animal that can be individualized only within society. Production by a solitary individual outside society, a rare event which might occur when a civilized person who has already absorbed the dynamic social forces is accidentally cast into the wilderness, is just as preposterous as the development of speech without individuals who live together and talk to one another. So, essentially, individuals don't exist in a void. They are shaped by the society they exist in. The individual is also shaped by the material.
And see, if you watch this channel, you've probably seen Joe Biden talk about how he doesn't care how people got how they were. He just wants to put them in jail so they don't hurt his family. So they don't. Liberals don't even care, right? They don't care why you got there. They don't care about society. They don't care about fixing it even. They just care about the moneyed interest. And they even say it. It's crazy. Democrats even say it, and you just won't listen. Well, some people will, but a lot of people just won't listen.
Real conditions of said society. As you can see, the Marxist approach makes a significant break with liberalism and has been consistently critical of it throughout history. So to speak of Marxism as a more radical form of liberalism doesn't make any sense. The divisions we see in American political discourse are limited in scope because the two options with which we are presented are two factions of the same capitalist ideology.
Exactly.
Though the ideal of a representative democracy appeals to the liberal sensibilities of many in the West, the electoral system we have actually presents a very narrow ideological scope,
Friends.
two sections of the capitalist class. While limited in scope, these divisions are often exaggerated through partisanship and tribalism by both liberals and conservatives,
Right, they play the game so that the people that don't pay attention think they're different.
though few major differences exist between them. A quick illustration of this factional division is seen in the issue of hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. Conservative Republicans, tending to be in favor of smaller money capitalism, are largely in favor of the procedure because it allows domestic oil companies to extract oil within their own borders, without needing to rely on multinational oil and banking entities to expropriate from or make deals with other oil-rich countries. On the other hand, liberal Democrats, often choosing to appear environmentally conscious on this front, favor the classic approach of multinational oil banking, supposedly sparing American soil the ecological devastation.
Let others do it.
In spite of this difference, we can see a clear class unity in the politics of the Democratic and Republican parties. For instance, both parties nearly always vote for interventions in the interest of global oil capital and favor sanctions against countries like Cuba and Venezuela. And while not a universal case, neither party tends to offer solidarity to worker movements. A prime example of this is when the United Auto Workers held a strike against General Motors, starting in September 2019.
Both parties are also pro-genocide. I mean, on the big issues, they are the same. On smaller issues, maybe they say, oh, I'll put a rainbow over here, and they'll say, we won't let you put the rainbow flag up over here. They say, we're going to change the name of a street from a Confederate person. They're going to say, keep the name of the Confederate person. But that doesn't even do anything. But the stuff that really matters, like the oil, wars, college, everything, universal health care, they're on the same side. The duopoly is the oligarchy. They're not going to do anything for the people.
The strike objectives were increased pensions and health benefits, as well as higher pay and a larger employee share of profits from General Motors. The majority of members of Congress who discussed this have instead spoken to alleged corruption within the leadership of the UAW and the ongoing federal investigation of said leadership. Though a few outliers have indeed expressed support for these workers, this often comes with the caveat of being supporters of the workers, but severely critical of or completely against the union as an organization. Ultimately, liberals and conservatives uphold the capitalist imperialist status quo, and anyone who wants to make a genuine societal change needs to recognize this false dichotomy. They uphold this status quo because that is the purpose of institutionalized politics in the U.S. state, to solely protect, expand, and perpetrate the interests of all capitalists as a class without concern for their liberal or conservative political leanings. Despite their bickering and political contradictions, behind the very useful curtain of a divided political landscape between Democrats and Republicans, their objective class purposes will always prevail. The line between the most conservative and the most liberal blurs whenever it comes solely to the interests of capital. Playing by the rules of the system we are opposing will only get us so far.
And so there is basically the difference in DEMINEM and me. Why I get so angry about him lying about the Democrats, saying he's on the left or he's of the left, and his wife too, Krystal Ball, talking about being on the left but still being vote blue no matter who, pushing well-meaning leftists into the right-wing capitalist system that only holds us down. He is not a leftist. He is not like us. He's not like anybody who really watches this channel. Probably maybe those who watch the channel when it's his videos, but those who watch the channel without his videos, he ain't like us. We're on the left. He's a liberal. He's not trying to help us. You guys know that, but we need to let the people who watch him know that. We need to get them really looking at things from across the spectrum.